The last thing Anna expected was to feel so out of place in the house she'd grown up in. The front door clicked behind her with a hollow finality, like a stage curtain drawn before the first act of a play no one really wanted to watch. The scent of rosemary roast wafted from the kitchen, deceptively comforting. Her mother's voice floated from the hallway. "Oh, Anna, there you are." As if 5 years hadn't passed since she last stood in this foyer, suitcase in hand, wearing a tighter smile than she felt. They were all gathered already, her father in his favorite chair, nursing a glass of wine, eyes not meeting hers. Her brother Mark hunched over his phone, barely looking up, and her sister Julia standing near the sideboard, a perfect glass of Merlot in hand, and an even more perfect smirk on her lips. "Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter," Julia said with mock delight. 5 years abroad and you still remember where we live." Anna managed a smile, the kind she'd mastered in corporate meetings, the kind that said, "Let's keep this professional." "It's good to see you, Jules." Her mother ushered her into the dining room, chirping about how much effort she'd put into dinner. The anniversary theme, the guest list, all the little distractions that kept any real emotion at bay. Anna wanted to say thank you. Instead, she stood in awkward silence, arms at her sides, unsure of whether to hug or be hugged. As the evening unraveled, so did the layers of subtle civility. Julia, polished and passive-aggressive as ever, took her usual place at the table, across from Anna naturally, and began to dissect her sister's life like a wine pairing, dry, distant, and lacking depth. "You've changed so much. I guess that happens when you forget who you are." Anna blinked. "I didn't forget who I am. She exhaled. "I chose something different." "Different," her father echoed, lifting his glass. "That's one way of putting it." That word hung in the air. Different. Like a verdict passed without trial. Her parents didn't need to say it out loud. They hadn't approved of her leaving, hadn't supported her career in media, and certainly didn't consider her European adventures real success. Not like the family business Julia now co-managed. Not like the kids Mark had, and the mortgage he paid on time. "Tell us again what it is you do now," her mother asked, slicing the roast with unnecessary precision. "I always forget. Something creative, isn't it?" Anna inhaled, trying not to let the barb lodge itself in too deeply. "Content strategy and media consulting, mostly digital platforms. Branding, storytelling." Her mother nodded blankly. Sounds modern. Another judgment passed with a smile. Mark, quiet until now, cleared his throat. "Must be nice to come and go as you please. Not everyone gets to just leave everything behind." That struck a nerve. Anna turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time. "I didn't leave everything. I just left home." Silence. This was supposed to be a dinner in honor of her father's 35 years in the business. A celebration, but it was quickly becoming a quiet trial. Her family played judge, jury, and audience, and Anna was the defendant who had dared to want something else. "I didn't abandon you," she added softly, voice tight. "I just needed something more than this." Julia tilted her head, sipping from her wine glass like a seasoned interrogator. "More than family, more than a life built on guilt," Anna replied before she could stop herself. "More than spending every day pretending to be someone I'm not, just to avoid disappointing you." A long pause. "I'm not ashamed of what I've done," she continued, trembling just slightly. "I worked hard. I built something on my own. I was scared and I did it anyway. That's not failure." "You know what your problem is, Anna," her father said quietly. "You think freedom is a virtue, but family isn't about freedom. It's about commitment." Anna's breath hitched. "I didn't not commit. I just didn't commit the way you wanted me to. I didn't marry a man I didn't love. I didn't stay in a job that made me feel invisible. I didn't build a life out of someone else's blueprint." Her mother shook her head. "You always had to do things your own way, and you always made me feel like that was wrong." Julia leaned back, Smug. Well, maybe if you'd actually been around, you'd understand what this family has gone through. There it was. The accusation buried beneath years of polite silence. The resentment that had fermented since the day Anna stepped onto that outbound plane. Anna's voice cracked slightly. Do you think I didn't miss you? That I didn't cry in my apartment some nights wishing I felt wanted? Do you think it was easy to leave, knowing every time I called, you sounded like I was interrupting something more important? Julia looked away. Mark's jaw clenched. Her mother set her fork down gently. We didn't know how to keep you. Anna swallowed. You didn't try. And then the words tumbled out. Not in anger, but in sorrow. I came back tonight because I hoped maybe we'd start over. That maybe we'd sit down, not as adversaries but as family. I'm not here to be forgiven or to apologize for living my life. I'm here because I love you, and I hoped you'd love me back, even if I'm not what you pictured. The air changed. Something in the room cracked. Too quiet to hear, but loud enough to feel. No one spoke for a moment, but for the first time all evening, Anna felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, not forgiveness, but clarity. She didn't want revenge. She wanted truth. She didn't need validation. She needed recognition. Because love without acceptance isn't really love. And family without space for difference isn't home. It's a cage. This was only the beginning. The morning after the dinner party, Anna woke to silence. The kind that doesn't soothe, but unsettles. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she opened her eyes and saw the floral wallpaper. It wasn't the same one from her childhood. The paint was new, too soft a shade of beige. Like the house was trying to forget she'd ever lived there. Her bookshelf was gone, replaced by a narrow desk and a few nondescript prints of birds in flight. Her posters, her photographs, her journals, everything that once screamed Anna's room had been boxed up or donated. She wasn't sure which. The bed still creaked in the same way when she shifted, but even that felt like a memory pretending to be real. She wandered downstairs barefoot, the floor colder than she remembered. In the kitchen, her mother stood at the stove. The smell of cinnamon and warm milk drifted through the air. Her favorite breakfast from when she was little, sweet semolina porridge, with a dollop of cherry jam in the center like a soft heart. Anna stood in the doorway for a moment, watching. Her mother didn't look up. You're awake, she said. Not quite warmly, not coldly either. Just neutrally. Sit down. It'll be ready in a minute. Anna obeyed, folding her hands on the worn wood table. Her father was already there, sipping coffee behind a newspaper held up like a shield. He grunted a greeting without looking at her. I didn't know you still remembered this, Anna said quietly, nodding at the pot on the stove. Her mother didn't answer. She just ladled the porridge into a bowl and set it in front of Anna with a carefulness that felt like an apology too fragile to say out loud. They ate in silence. No one asked about her flight, her job, her apartment in Lisbon. Her mother refilled her father's coffee cup. Her father turned the page of the newspaper. It was like trying to talk to ghosts who didn't know they were dead. Anna stood to wash her bowl when she heard voices drifting in from the hallway. At first, she thought it was the radio, but then she recognized her aunt's voice, sharp but not unkind. She always wanted different things, the aunt said. Maybe we should have tried harder to understand that. You think she ran away, but maybe she just couldn't breathe here. She could have called more, her brother's voice replied, softer than usual. Mom cried a lot after she left. Anna didn't move. She stayed by the sink, hands clutching the edge, unsure if she should be listening, but unable to stop. She cried every night for weeks, Mark continued. Didn't want anyone to know. Dad never said anything, just kept going to work. But she hurt. You all say Anna left us, but we never really met her where she was. We only ever wanted her to come back to us, on our terms. There was a long pause. Then her aunt again. Maybe it's not about who was right. Maybe it's about learning to speak the same language. The hallway fell silent. Anna felt the heat rise behind her eyes. It was the first time she had heard her family speak about her absence not as abandonment, but as loss. And not just their loss. Hers too. Back upstairs, she sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed and stared at the packed bookshelves of someone else's life. A guest in the home that once held her dreams in its walls. And yet, someone had remembered what she liked to eat. Someone had told stories about her while she was gone. Maybe they don't know how to say, "I miss you" in words, she thought. Maybe they only know how to say it with porridge and overheard regrets. Her mother didn't say much the rest of the day. She didn't need to. When Anna walked into the kitchen later that afternoon, she saw the same blue mug she always used waiting for her, filled with tea steeped the exact way she liked it. Strong, just a hint of sugar. No one had asked, and yet it was there. Her father passed through the living room while she was reading, pausing by the doorway. He didn't enter. "You need anything while I'm out?" he asked, eyes on the floor. "No, I'm good, thanks." He nodded, lingered a second too long, then left. Anna watched him go and felt the ache of things unsaid, the lifetime of conversations that had been dodged, deflected, or left unspoken. But for the first time, it didn't feel like rejection. It felt like uncertainty, like two people circling the same truth, but speaking in different dialects of love. Later, she walked the perimeter of the backyard, her shoes crunching the frost-stiffened grass. The trees were bare, the swing set long gone, but the garden her mother used to tend had come back to life, full of rosemary, mint, and tiny red peppers. She sat on the porch steps and listened to the wind rattling through the branches. Julia passed behind her on the way to the car and stopped for a moment. "Mom made your room into a guest room 2 years ago," she said, not quite looking at Anna. "She cried the whole time she packed your books. I told her she should leave it the way it was. She said it hurt too much." Anna turned. "Did you ever miss me?" Julia hesitated. "We were all just trying to hold it together. You weren't the only one who felt alone, you know." Anna nodded. "I know that now." Another pause. "I was jealous," Julia admitted. "You left. You made something for yourself. I stayed and She trailed off, shrugged. "Sometimes I wish I'd had your courage. Sometimes I wish I'd had your roots," Anna whispered. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. But Julia nodded, tight-lipped, and walked away. And for Anna, that was enough, for now. That night, she stood by the window of her childhood room, staring at the unfamiliar space reflected in the glass. It still didn't feel like home, but the silence wasn't as heavy. The air wasn't as cold. There were no dramatic apologies, no tearful breakthroughs, but the walls didn't feel as distant. And somewhere in the cracks between their silences, Anna began to sense it. Not reconciliation, not yet, but the first hint of it. A breath, a pause, a possibility. She had come back a stranger, but maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to leave as one. Anna didn't leave. Not right away. She told herself it was because her flight was flexible, or because she still hadn't seen her old friend from school, or because it made sense to spend a few extra days while she was already here. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was more delicate than that, harder to name. Something had shifted, just slightly, since the dinner. Not a resolution, nothing so clean, but the distance didn't feel quite as icy. The silences no longer scraped against her. She stayed because she wanted to see if the silence could turn into something else. The first morning she stayed, her father brought home pastries from the bakery she used to love. Without a word, her mother asked if she wanted to help make dinner, handing her a knife and a bowl of onions like they'd done this 100 times. They cooked in near silence, her mother chopping vegetables, Anna stirring the sauce. But this time the quiet wasn't stiff. It felt like space, like permission. That night, they sat around the television watching an old film they'd all seen a dozen times. No one argued about what to watch. Julia arrived with a bottle of wine and curled up in her usual corner of the couch. Even Mark, who still carried tension in his shoulders whenever Anna entered the room, passed her the remote without a snide remark. It was weirdly easy, not because everything was fixed, but because no one was pretending it was. The next day, they went for a walk. Just Anna, her mother, and her aunt. They strolled through the park where she used to ride her bike, past the duck pond and the crooked bench that still leaned to one side. Her mother asked about Lisbon, not about real estate or rent prices, but about what it felt like to live near the ocean, whether the air smelled different, whether she'd made friends. Anna talked, and her mother listened. Really listened. Later, back at the house, Mark offered to make tea and Julia helped fold laundry, and Anna found herself wondering how many years they'd all been holding their breath around each other. That afternoon, Anna wandered through the old part of town, the cobblestone streets, the tiny bookstore that still smelled of dust and ink, the cafe where she wrote bad poetry in high school and flirted with her first girlfriend. It felt like walking through an echo of herself. At the cafe, she ran into Mila. Mila hadn't changed much, still had that soft, open smile, still wore earrings that didn't match. They hugged tightly, the way people do when they haven't spoken in years. But remember what it meant to once be inseparable. They talked for hours about the lives they'd built, the ones they'd escaped, the strange freedom of growing older and realizing your parents were never the villains, just scared people doing their best. Mila tilted her head at one point and said, "You always wanted to leave, but you never wanted to disappear." That hit Anna in the chest, because it was true. She had wanted more. She had wanted elsewhere, but she had never wanted to be erased from the story. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Anna found a small cardboard box sitting on her bed. It was old, the corners frayed. A sticky note was attached to the top in her mother's neat handwriting. "For you, when you're ready." Inside were photographs, her childhood birthdays, her high school graduation, a blurry shot of her standing on a pier, wind in her hair. Her mother had written the dates on the backs, sometimes little notes, "Your favorite sweater," or "You were afraid of the ducks but wouldn't admit it." Beneath the photos were pages torn from diaries. Not hers, her mother's, yellowed with time, edges brittle, and at the very bottom, folded carefully in a plastic sleeve, a note. It was dated the summer Anna turned 18, the year she left. Her mother's handwriting was smaller here, uncertain. The words read like someone trying to understand a foreign language without a dictionary. "I don't know how to be the kind of mother she needs. She wants to fly, and all I know how to do is build a nest. I want her to stay because I love her, but I'm afraid that love is starting to feel like a cage. Maybe that's what real love is, letting someone go even when it feels like breaking." Anna read the note 3 times, then a 4th. It wasn't an apology, but it was the truth. And somehow, that meant more. The next day, she didn't wait for someone else to make the first move. She brewed the tea herself, chamomile, lemon balm, and a hint of mint, and set it out with 3 mismatched mugs. Then she called her parents into the kitchen and waited, heart thudding, as they sat down across from her. She didn't come as a daughter seeking approval. She came as Anna, a woman, a whole person, and she asked the question that mattered most. "Can we talk?" Her father shifted, eyes narrowed in that familiar way, but he nodded. Her mother folded her hands on the table, quiet. "I don't need you to agree with all the choices I've made," Anna said, "but I need you to know I didn't make them against you. I made them for me." No one interrupted. "I'm not here to accuse anyone," she continued, "but I also don't want to keep walking around this house pretending we were never hurt by each other." Her father looked down. "We were scared," he said after a long pause. "You left so fast. We didn't know how to reach you. I didn't know how to stay," Anna replied gently. "Not when I felt like who I was. Wasn't enough." Her mother's voice cracked. "You were always enough. We just didn't know how to say it." That broke something open. The rest of the conversation wasn't tidy. There were long pauses, awkward admissions, half-started sentences. But no one raised their voice. No one left the table. Anna cried quietly. Her mother held her hand. Her father apologized. Not perfectly, not eloquently, but honestly. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a beginning. 3 cups of tea, shared without armor. 3 people, not playing roles, just being. For the first time in years, Anna felt like they were all at the same table. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. And that, she realized, was what made it family. A few more days slipped by like the slow unfolding of a song. The house still didn't quite feel like home, but it no longer felt like a stranger either. It was a place with history, familiar yet changed, just like Anna herself. The edges between her and her family had softened, not erased, but worn down enough that their presence didn't bruise anymore. In the kitchen, she and her mother baked a cherry pie together, side by side. They moved around each other easily, almost instinctively, trading jokes about their terrible baking skills and laughing when Anna accidentally dusted herself with flour. Sometimes they lapsed into silence, but this silence didn't sting. It wasn't heavy or loaded with the things left unsaid. It was simply there, a space they shared without expectation or fear. The kitchen smelled like butter, vanilla, and something even more delicate, something like forgiveness. Later, Anna and her father went for a walk through the old neighborhood, past crooked fences and rusted swing sets, down streets that held the footprints of her childhood. Her father wasn't a man for long talks. His words always came measured and cautious, like stones laid carefully in a stream. But halfway through their walk, as they stood watching the sun sag behind the rooftops, he spoke. "Your mother," he said gruffly, not looking at her, "never stopped thinking about you for a single day." He shifted, clearing his throat. Then, almost too quietly, he added, "Neither did I." Simple words, awkward, sincere, and they cracked something open in Anna more cleanly than any apology could have. She felt it land in her chest like a seed finding fertile ground. She smiled, just a little, and he smiled back, almost shyly. They didn't say anything else. They didn't need to. The evening before she left, Anna met Mila one last time. They chose the same old cafe, the one where time seemed to pool in the corners and the windows blurred a little in the late light. They sat across from each other, hands resting side by side on the table, fingertips brushing. There were 1,000 things Anna could have said, about Lisbon, about fear, about coming home, but she didn't. Neither did Mila. They simply held hands, breathing the same air, letting silence stitch the distance between them closed. Not because there was nothing to say, but because there was no need to say it. When it was time to leave, they hugged tightly. The kind of hug that says, "I see you even when life pulls you in different directions." The morning of her departure was bright and quiet. No drama, no desperate pleas, just small gestures stitched together like a quilt of quiet love. Her mother tucked a jar of homemade cherry jam into her suitcase without a word, only smiling and murmuring, "For mornings in Lisbon." Her father pulled her into a hug, brief, a little clumsy, but real. "Take care of yourself, kid," he said roughly, like the words had been living under his tongue for years. Julia leaned against the doorway, mug in hand, and gave a lazy wave. "Don't be a stranger," she teased. And Mark, gruff as ever, simply said, "Right when you get there." That was it. Enough. At the airport, Anna watched the town slip away beneath the curve of the earth. As the plane lifted, she realized she wasn't running anymore. Not from disappointment, not from anger, not even from sadness. She was flying toward something now, toward herself. The memories she carried weren't barbed anymore. They didn't cut or drag her backward. They simply warmed her, like stones gathered on a beach, worn smooth by time and touch. When she arrived back at her apartment in Lisbon, small, sun-drenched, utterly hers, she unpacked her suitcase slowly. At the bottom, tucked among her clothes, was the box her mother had given her, the one filled with photos, letters, small pieces of a life that had always quietly included her, even when she hadn't known it. Anna didn't hide it away. She set it carefully on a shelf, where the late afternoon sun could catch the edges of it, lighting it up like something sacred. She hadn't returned to stay, but she hadn't fled either. For the first time, Anna knew she didn't have to choose between her past and her future. She could carry them both, and that, finally, was enough.